Welcome to the Firepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff McDowell Jr.
And I'm Bennett Grove.
Between us, we have 20 years of firefighting experience.
And over 15 years of experience building, growing, and leading small businesses.
Each episode, we get after it by discussing leadership, life, and development.
We'll also unpack the wins and losses that we've experienced along the way.
You ready, big dog?
I'm ready, my man.
Let's get it.
Welcome to another Firepreneurs Podcast. Today we have a special guest. It's my buddy Nick Leis. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him before we bring Nick on here. So this episode is going to be fun. It's going to be motivational, and it's going to make you feel a little bit like crap that you haven't achieved much because Nick has done a lot. So here's a little background on my buddy Nick Leis. Aside from the fact that he can quote about every movie from the 80s to the 2010 era, he started out in the military in air transportation, which is a fun career field in and of itself in the Air Force, right? But wasn't satisfied, moved on, and became a firefighter. And that's where I met Nick originally. He became a firefighter in the Air Force, an actual Fire Dawg. After spending some time as a firefighter, he went and got his paramedic certification, so then he became a firefighter paramedic. Worked as a firefighter in the military, and then he worked as a firefighter in the civilian sector as well, down at Fort Campbell with me when I was there. After that, Nick said that wasn't good enough. I'm not cool being Kurt Russell from Backdraft, even though it's really awesome. I'm going to go ahead and move on, and I think I'm going to go be Arnold Schwarzenegger from Predator. I'm going to go be a commando. And so he joined the Special Forces parts of the Air Force, which is TACP, which is an incredibly grueling, intensive indoctrination course, go through lots of training. So then he became a Special Forces soldier. Did that from 2009 to 2017, held various different roles in the Special Forces sector during that time, and then became what he is doing now, which he transitioned from enlisted ranks to officer ranks and is now being trained to be a pilot for the A-10. He has now become a pilot in the Air Force. Wow, that's a lot of stuff, and I already feel like I haven't done much with my life. So why don't we go on ahead and bring on Nick Leis. Nick, my man. Welcome to the Firepreneurs Podcast.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
What do you think? Did I do you any justice? What did I leave out? Did I leave out working on Jeep Wranglers? I know the one thing I left out was that you know how to fix a CJ5. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
dude. So one of the other pieces, and I think this is going to be pretty cool for the Firepreneurs audience, is that not only did you do all these amazing things in the military, but during that period of time, you also had a small foray into entrepreneurship. You started a small little business and ended up building a product and selling it and then licensing it, something to that effect, right?
Correct.
Can you start on that for us? Give me a little background on the entrepreneurial thing that you started with, and then we'll get into all these amazing things that you did.
All right. Yeah. So, as a TACP, so originally the TACP was just a conventional type dude. And just recently they've become under the AVSOC Special Warfare. Anyway, so, I hate to leave anything like it is. I can't just buy a car and leave it stock. I just can't do that. So with our body armor and a lot of the stuff that we carry as far as pouches and things, you kind of really have only one option now, and it's called MOLLE. I'm sure you guys have seen that. It's, pretty typical. Got the horizontal stitching on it. But you can only put your pouches on one of two ways, either right side up or upside down. I didn't like that. So I went about trying to come up with a better way that you could attach stuff at more than just two angles. Well, I guess one angle, technically. So I spent about 2 or 3 months, and I was lucky enough to have access to a laser engraver. So it kind of made it easy on me. Took about 2 or 3 months, came up with what I thought was a pretty good idea. And actually kind of a Martha Stewart type or whatever you want to. So we have a Sailrite sewing machine. So a big industrial sewing machine, so we could make our own stuff. So I sewed some pouches together, came up with this new method. I called it the TACP, the Tactical Advantage Connection Panel.
Nice.
And got a provisional patent on it. I really, how it is. You get kind of busy with one thing and you can't really dedicate all your time to the other. So happened to be at a trade show, knew a couple people from a company that I've worked with in the past, and they were fairly interested in it. So they took control, and did a little bit of a licensing deal. They changed it slightly. So my version of it probably stopped being made probably 2 years ago. But they, like with any mediocre idea, someone's going to come along and make it better, which is fine. I mean, that's cool. So it's kind of nice to see a product and, clearly it's different from what I had, but it's, just a generation beyond what I made. So it's kind of cool to see.
That's awesome, dude. And you're selling yourself short. Didn't you also apply for a patent? I mean, you went through the whole patent process, which is...
I did. Yes. So I got a provisional patent, and I didn't have it long enough to even bother with an actual patent. So provisional patent is fairly easy. You still have to pay a little bit of money, but it gives you like some mediocre protection. That's kind of like, hey, my idea was here first. I'm just too unsure if this is really what I want to do. Yeah. So
that's cool, man. I mean, that the knowledge you gain just by doing some of these application processes in and of themselves are a huge resource for other people that you can help them with. So, I mean, the fact that you even did that was awesome. And so you had an idea, you did what an entrepreneur does. You found a problem, you tried to solve it. You solved it temporarily. Somebody else came along and solved it better down the road. But I just think it's cool that even before we get into all the stuff you did as a military man, and still are a military man, you also still already had a small foray into entrepreneurship, which looks like we know what you're going to be doing after you retire. So go ahead and do some education for some of our listeners that don't quite know what TACP stands for. Can you break that down?
Yep. So TACP is basically you're the Air Force liaison with the Army. And you integrate air and ground forces. So that kind of can mean different things, but for kind of what I did and what most TACPs do is you get assigned to an Army unit, not necessarily American either. In deployments, it's usually we've got guys that have supported German special operations, Australians, kind of like the gambit. So it kind of in a very short synapse, it kind of, we get assigned to this Army unit, and then, you either plan a mission and do whatever. And then as the TACP, you're going to go ahead and request aircraft and things like that to have for this mission. Then you're going to go out. The Australians like to call them walkabouts. So you literally just put a rucksack on and go walking through the mountains of Afghanistan or the sands of Iraq or wherever you're at. And you're there, you're kind of like, I kind of relate it into terms of, you see the fire extinguishers on the wall everywhere, and it's like in case of emergency, break glass. I feel like that's what a TACP and a JTAC does. So a JTAC is the Joint Terminal Attack Controller. That's just the the certification that you have. So with that, you're just walking along with your rifle doing, pretty much Army grunt things, which I didn't realize when I first signed up in the Air Force that's what I was going to be doing. But yeah, you just walk around, man. There's different types of missions. There's direct action. So you might helo in onto an objective, do something, maybe try to, create effects in a certain way, then you're going to leave. But normally you're just walking around doing whatever. If you get into a contact that you can't really handle organically, so a lot of times you're not rolling around like in 100 dude convoy. It might just be like, there were at times it was me and two other guys sitting up on a hillside watching another team go through. So you're kind of out there on your own. But as a TACP, I've got aircraft. So it's kind of that, break glass in case of emergency, something weird happens. I think we can't handle it, call in aircraft and, I hate to say it, do the Lord's work. So.
And so TACP, the acronym stands for Tactical Air Control Party. Is that right? What is that?
Yep, correct. Yeah. Tactical Air Control Party. So that was, they've been doing it since World War II. And then TACP became a thing in the kind of like the late 80s, as far as formalized. And they call it a party because it used to be a actual controller. And then you had a young guy called a ROMAD that was kind of like your, you were Obi-Wan, and then you had your nice little,
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I was in a basic training and I had a drill sergeant who was former TACP. And, I looked up to the pararescue jumpers in the Air Force and the combat controllers, the CCTs, and I didn't know much about TACPs, and it didn't really make the mistake of saying anything to the drill sergeant, but somebody else did. And it's like, well, isn't CCT better than TACP? And I looked at this kid and I'm like, oh my gosh, are you like trying to die? Like, why would you even ask a drill instructor that question? But he did. And we got to watch the aftermath of what happened when you ask a drill instructor that question and try to compare a CCT to a TACP. And I just remember his response was, within like 1 inch of this guy's face and spit flying in at his eyeballs. We will eat any other person in the Air Force for breakfast. TACP is the best. And, just went on this thing of tirade of it. It's like every time I hear TACP, I remember Tech Sergeant Johnson from basic training ripping some kid. But I'm sure you've never seen anything like that, Nick, in your military.
Yeah, he sounds like a solid TACP. I like him.
Okay, man. So let's back up here. Let's start with, and then Jeff and I are gonna kind of bounce around with some questions if you don't mind, because I think this episode, there's just going to be so much that I think there's a little bit of something in here for everybody. And with your experience, and you're just somebody that's put your head down and gotten stuff done, man. And you've done these things that most people dream about. One of them would be enough. Like people dream about becoming a firefighter. People dream about becoming, special forces soldier, or even going into TACP, or people dream about becoming a pilot. And a lot of people never even that dream about it, that actually that's what they want to do, still don't get there. And yet here you are with 3 of these things under your belt, man. So there's so much that we want to unpack today, from like a mental discipline perspective, how you get through, possibly some struggles, some failures along the way I want to unpack. But, dude, we got to go back to a young Nick Leis, air transportation. What motivated you to pursue a path in firefighting?
So that was originally what I wanted to do in Louisville. And by the time I got all my paperwork in, there were no more, firefighting positions available. So I still wanted to join. So I asked the recruiter, what's the quickest, AFSC that I can just go to basic training, get there and come back. And it was air transportation. It was 6 weeks down at Lackland after basic training. So, you get, what was it, 6 weeks back when we went through for basic training, something like that?
Back in the day.
So, yeah, we did that, came back. It wasn't really what I wanted to do. And honestly, I had a chief there. His name was Tommy Downs. He passed away, I think, like 2009-ish. But he was instrumental in kind of kicking off my military career. As far as I didn't have to explain to him at all. I just went to him and was like, hey, chief, this isn't what I want to do. I want to do something else. And he didn't say anything. He was like, all right, what do you want to do? I was like, I want to be a firefighter, and there's an opening in Terre Haute. He was like, all right, man. He's like, just tell me what paperwork I have to sign, and I'll sign it.
Man.
So I've taken that, all the way through my career. Like, if I have a young guy that comes to me and tells me he wants to do anything, I try not to be the one that's like, well, obstacle. They have to be realistic with it. But it's also, I don't want to be the guy that stops somebody from, pursuing what they want to do. So, he was instrumental. Within the first, 30 days of me being in the actual Air Force, getting me kind of squared away.
Sounds like good leadership, man. So he was there for you and backed you up, and you went to him with a problem. He helped you solve it. He didn't give you what you said, what a lot of people will do, obstacle, to not do something. They'll make it sound like it's limiting, right? So
right.
That's pretty awesome. So then you decided, so firefighting, was that something you always wanted to do growing up, or was that something that as you got older and you got in the military and you saw other people doing it? Like, talk to me a little bit about that.
I had a short foray into college. Didn't work out for me, but one of my roommates, he was a firefighter before we went to college. His family has been kind of, I would say, in the system of the Louisville Fire Department for several generations. So when we were going to school together, he would take me back to Louisville, and I got to watch practice burns and things like that. I'm like, hey, this seems pretty cool. I think I want to do this. So that's kind of what got me into the path of wanting to be a firefighter.
Right on, man. McSwole, I'm sure you have some questions on the fire side.
Yeah. So just hearing you talk a little bit about your story and hearing a little bit about you, one thing I always tell people is nobody ever accomplishes their goals alone. And one thing that people don't do enough of, I think, is ask people. So it sounds like that you've had some experience and I want you to kind of walk through how you've approached your leadership, kind of how you've asked them and laid out your goals to them, and just really how that's helped you kind of get to where you want to be, if it has. It sounds like it has, but
Yeah. No, it has. So I explained air transportation. And then, when Bennett and I were in the fire department, we had Chief Stewart. And I went to him and I'm like, hey, Chief, I want to be an EMT or a paramedic. And he was like, okay, cool, figure it out. So I found a place that did it was like 93 days straight of paramedic school.
I remember that. You were my roommate at the time.
Man, that's a lot.
Yeah, which I would not recommend.
No.
But I went to Chief Stewart and I was like, hey, this is what I do. I found it and it was, X amount of money, right? And he was like, cool, the unit will pay for it. So I did that, and then further on down the line, when we got bracked, I went to the recruiters and like, hey, what is going to come here? And they came along with TACP. Once again, Chief Stewart was great in kind of releasing me from my firefighting duties earlier than he probably could have, and let me do TACP stuff. And then as a TACP, I've never been shy about letting people know what I want to do, because if they don't know, they're not going to try to help you or set you up for success, and not in a way that they're going to try to make you fail. But if an opportunity comes along and they're like, hey, I don't have anybody to fill this, but it was something that you wanted to do, they're just going to let it go by the wayside.
Right.
So yeah, all through TACP, it was like, hey, I want to go to air assault. I want to go to airborne. I want to go to sniper school. I want to do all these things. And you just tell them what you want to do. And I mean, I guess it was luck. I don't know. I got everything I've ever wanted. And then like 2016, I took the AFOQT on a whim. I was walking, I had the credit union is by the base education.
AFOQT, for those that don't know, Air Force Officers Qualification Test, right?
Correct. Yep. So just like an enlisted guy would take the ASVAB, officers have to take the AFOQT. Walking by, and an old TACP was now the chief of Bedham, and he was like, hey, Nick, as I walked by, he was like, hey, do you want to take the FOQT today? And I'm like, sure.
Dude, that is not how it happened. You gotta be kidding me. And now you're a pilot because of that.
Yeah. So, well, in my 10 seconds of thinking, I'm like, oh, I'll just be a TACP officer. So we have what's called a 13 Lima, which is kind of an organic TACP officer. Then we have ALOs, which are rated pilots that come and hang out at an ASOS. So I took the AFOQT, got my scores, and had another buddy that did kind of the same thing, but he was just a TACP officer. Looking at my scores, and he was like, bro, those are good scores. You could be a pilot. And I'm 33 at the time. And I'm like, I'm way too old to be a pilot. And he was like, I think there's waivers. So I went to my commander, who's an A-10 pilot. And I'm like, hey, sir, like, I want to be a pilot. Like, what do I got to do? And man, no questions asked. It wasn't like, oh, you're too old, or are you sure this is what you really want to do? I mean, in like 30 seconds, he was like, make sure you got your college degree, get your private pilot's license, X, Y, Z. I had to get LASIK. I mean, dude, this is like end of September. And then by like mid-October, I had already got LASIK, enrolled back in college. Like any typical enlisted dude, I had zero college, I had my CCAF. And then started getting my private pilot's license, all for the packet that was due like in February. So I had like 4 months to get like all of this stuff done. Now, the college degree, you just have to have, by the time you get an interview, you've got to be within 365 days. But in a span of, span of 12 months, like I said, LASIK, I ended up getting my college degree in 12 months.
Dude, that's what I'm freaking talking about, Nick. Nick said, yeah, I'm going to do this. I just banged it out. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about, taking some action.
So I actually had to go to 2 schools simultaneously. I went to Indiana State, and then I did an online school. So I was taking about, depending upon the semester, like 24 to 30 credit hours a semester for the whole year.
That's crazy.
Good night, almighty Lias, dude.
Once again, don't recommend that.
Man, that was a lot of great info just out of that question. I think you hit on, if people don't know what they don't know, and if you're not telling them kind of what you want to achieve, then they're not going to help you. Not because they don't want to, but just they don't know. Exactly. So and then obviously just the straight up busting your ass to get that stuff done, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, so like one of the things that we're always talking to, not just anybody listening to the podcast, but inside of the company at Fire Dogs is we're always trying to teach our guys like when you have dreams, you got to say them out loud, write them down, because just the act of just communicating that to maybe sometimes just yourself, but in your case, you communicated what you wanted to somebody else. And then that, when you put that out in the universe, like there will be people will conspire to assist you. And that's kind of what happened. Like you went to people like, hey, I would like to do this. And they're like, yeah, you're a stand-up dude. You work hard. You show up to work on time. I want to help you get there. And so how can we help you? And then like in your career, it's a really telling example of, hey, I want to become a firefighter. Okay, let's make it happen, because your chief down in Louisville at the time was like, you're a stand-up airman. I'm going to help you out how I can. Then you get to Terre Haute where we were at, and Chief Stewart's like, yeah, Leis is always on time, did a good job on the TDYs. Like you're always that guy in our unit, right? So no wonder when you're like, hey, I want to go to paramedic school, Chief Stewart was like, okay, let's make it happen. And then you're like, you go to TACP. Like, I think that the takeaway here there's going to be a lot of takeaways on this episode for sure. But I get excited when I hear you tell that story, because it just requires people to communicate and talk about their goals, talk about their dreams. Sometimes we just suppress those. And when you actually say them out loud, you just don't know what can happen. Like, give me a break, dude. You're walking down the guard base in Terre Haute, right? And one of your TACP, hey, Nick, you want to take the AFOQT? Like, you never told me that story. Like, it's freaking crazy. You're like, yeah, you know what? Why not? I'll go take the AFOQT. And then you knock it out the park, right? And it just sends your life down this different trajectory. So, like, that's what the power of just, like, communicating, and then complemented with, I mean, in that story alone, like, I sit here and smack the table. I'm ready to go do some bench press, because, like, for goodness sake, dude, you go out there and you're like, okay, I got the scores. I can be a pilot. This is what they've told me I've got to do. I'm going to take massive action. I'm going to take massive freaking action. And I'm going to go enroll in college, get LASIK surgery. Like, you made decisions because you knew that was going to be what you wanted to put in front of you for the next chapter of your life. Like, that's freaking awesome, Nick. Like, good grief, dude. Like, most people, when they see those obstacles, they don't see it as an obstacle. They see it as a wall that has no sides and no end to the top, that they're just going to walk into like a video game, just be stuck there like in Wreck-It Ralph, like banging their head against the wall, right? They don't see it as the thing that they're going to like be able to somehow get over, or get around. And that is so life, man. Like, people are going to have obstacles, and it's going to feel like it's an endless wall to the sides and the bottom and the top. And instead, you were like, okay, I've got to do all these really freaking uncomfortable, like, painful things. And you did them, and you put them in motion. Like, that's just awesome, dude. But so it brings up, I'm going to talk about something else, though, because I got to segue, because I know we don't have too much time. But like Jeff said, there's no way you do this alone. And I know what part of the answer to this question is going to be is, so to do all this, you had to have support, right?
Right.
To do the college, to expedite that. And at a certain stage of your life, Nick the commando, Nick the firefighter, Nick the freaking, the most interesting man in the Air Force is what I always call you, became Nick the husband and became Nick the dad. Yeah. So can you talk to us a little bit about, what motivates you? What's some of your whys? Like, why do you put yourself through this, or why do you do these things? And is there a motivating factor, or does it tie to family? Can you talk to us about that?
It does. So my stepdad, who's been my, kind of my father figure since I've been about 2, he has cystic fibrosis, so lung disease. And then we're in a bad car accident when I was younger. So he's walked with a cane for the past probably 20-ish years. Had a double lung transplant in like 2005. So he was a pretty active dude up until that point. And just kind of seeing a guy that, used to, go play softball and go do all these outdoor things, kind of be like relegated to not being able to do this, kind of sets a little bit of a motivation factor there of, kind of what am I waiting for? What's my excuse to not do what I want to do? So that kind of set that all in motion, around the time I was 17, 18 years old. And getting married, man, Mallory is awesome. She takes no excuses. I mean, she is hard as any drill instructor, so to speak, I've ever met in my life. And that's a good thing. I think if you're going to find a partner, you need to find someone that not really compliments you, but isn't willing to let you just kind of, get by. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then we had some pretty good struggles, trying to have our and/or son. And then we had our first daughter in 2015, June. She's awesome. So when my wife and I started having kids, we're like, hey, if we're going to do this, we need to kind of make this like back to back to back. You're going like the old Bulls three-peat, So we've got 3 daughters, about the 6, 4, and 2-ish right now. And man, that's a motivating factor for me because, I always remember when I was younger, looking up to my dad and thinking, like, man, he is, a great role model. Like everything he did when your parents, when you're younger, your parents are magic to you. It's just, they do all these things, like pay taxes and you don't even know how they work, but you're like, man, this is incredible. But yeah, so really it is, the motivation to me is whenever it comes, whenever and wherever my time to die is, dude, I don't want to look back on anything and regret that I didn't do something. And also want to look back and kind of think like, yeah, man, I did everything that I set my mind to and wanted to do. That's kind of weird that death is my motivating factor, but it really is. Trying to cram everything I can in before I go.
Thanks for sharing that, man. Jeff, do you want to pull on that thread or what do you got?
Yeah, I think real quick, and we've talked about this too with the previous question, is that seeing opportunities everywhere, even if it's a challenge, it's not a challenge, it's an opportunity. It just depends on how much work you're willing to put into it to seek that opportunity. And you've got a great story for that already, and we haven't even uncovered everything, I don't think. So the next question I want to ask, we ask a lot of people, we delve into failures, and in the fire service and military, we're not afraid of failures, and that's how we learn. So what was a failure that you remember, and what did you take away from it?
There's been failures at every level and every step. Most recently, at pilot training, I've gone through everything in the military, and I've put pretty solid, 100%, 10% effort into things, and have never had an issue. In the beginning of pilot training, I went through the T6 program, didn't fail a single sortie. So you've got roughly, you fly, it's like 58, 60 something sorties, to include like, I don't know, probably 20 sims. It made it through unscathed. I didn't fail anything. Get to T-38s. So a T-38 it's a pretty unforgiving aircraft if you fly it incorrectly. It was first introduced in 1959. And most of these aircraft we're flying are 50 and 60 years old right now. So clearly you're designed in a different era. But in my first 4 flights, I hooked my first ride for a landing. And you could have, that's the thing too, with this, you could have the best sortie. You could fly that plane amazingly for an hour and 10 minutes, and then you could throw it all away in the last 30 seconds. And man, you fail the ride and you're like, this is ridiculous. You're like, I can't believe I crushed that entire thing. And then, in the last 30 seconds, I failed. On the flip side of that, on my check rides, you get 3 check rides. You get it's called a contact check ride. It's your first one. You take off, go to the MOA, and you do like some aerobatic maneuvers and just kind of show that you can control the airplane and come back. Well, when you first take off, you have to do an emergency pattern, which is a single engine. You pretend like one of your engines is out and you do a touch and go landing. Well, touch and go, not a landing. And so when you do that, there's certain steps you have to do. So this is with the first 5 minutes of taking off. You set your flaps to 60%, and I set my flaps to 100%. And I rode it all the way in, and I'm getting ready to get to like the point where you're transitioning to landing, and my IP in the back seat's like, hey man, why don't you go around? And as soon as that happened, I'm like, I hooked this ride. I failed my check ride. I cannot believe this happened. But I still have another 50 minutes of flying in front of me. I can't just be like, hey coach, I'm done. Like, will you land this plane from the back? You got like 10 seconds to regroup yourself, realize that you have failed and you failed pretty hard, and then just go out and crush the rest of it. Probably the biggest compliment I've gotten UPT so far was after that ride. We land, go to the debriefing, and the instructor's like, hey man, he was like, do you know you hooked? I'm like, oh yeah. I was like, I knew right then you hooked. He was like, hey, but he's like, you kept it together. and you flew a gorgeous sortie after that. So kind of, when you fail, you can't just dwell on those failures. You just can't. I mean, regardless of the scale or the magnitude, you got to just kind of compartmentalize that, put it in the past, don't forget it, but just got to truck on.
Right. Yeah. That's I had something similar in Fire Academy, not to take away from your story, but I was doing a search, got completely lost in the search in a commercial building, and had partner with me. We had a victim with us, and man, I was just whooped. And then I get done and ask the instructor, I'm like, that was terrible. It was awful. Like, what could I have done better? He's like, honestly, you did all right. He's like, not everything's going to go perfect, man. He's like, you messed up, but you kept your composure and you got out of it. So again, I think it's just that mindset of it, it's not a challenge. It's an opportunity. This is what's happened. This is what I'm dealt. I'm still going to push through and do the best that I can.
Nick, man, that story is pretty solid, dude. And I think I want to pull on that string a little bit if I could, because I think what you described is a testament to your mental toughness and your like drive. And because, like you said, you could have easily said, okay, go ahead and land the plane. And I think maybe a lot of people probably do that. In your world, they probably do have the instructor just land the plane and then check out for that day. I mean, how many people would really go back out and then do that, And I think that's a testament to your mental toughness. Like, this was just a failure. I'm going to push through, and I'm going to go out there again, And so to pull on that string, I mean, mental toughness is something that, tie it back to what Firepreneurs is, what we're trying to do here, Jeff and I, is we're trying to help small business owners that are also firefighters, so firefighters that own small businesses. Break through some of these obstacles that we keep talking about, these little mental checkpoints where like those challenges could make you, I'm done with this. I'm not going to do this anymore. Like when people get to that point, how do we get them to push through? And so just every now and then try to provide the ammunition to do it. And man, that story right there is just such a telling example, but it's kind of hard to put it into context because not everybody's going to be a pilot. You know what I mean? So try to bring it home for us, like to something that, in our community, because you were a firefighter and you've been an entrepreneur, a lot of things that people are facing right now with COVID is every day is a challenge. Every day there's something new. Well, this person was hanging out with this person at Thanksgiving and there was possible close contact. Now that person's got COVID. Now this person's not coming into work and they're going to be out for 10 days. And then the small business owner's like, well, now I have to keep this person paid. And, how do I keep the business running and keep paying these bills? And like, and people right now are throwing in the towel. They're just like, why would I do this to myself? Why do I keep running a business right now? I'm done. This is it. Right. I have every reason to just quit right now. Like there's just the odds are stacked. What do you, in your disciplines, like your daily disciplines that you do to help build that mental toughness so that when you find yourself in that moment, which is just awesome to us because we're never going to experience that in a plane, but I think that you were able to, in that moment, make that snapshot decision to press on and go out there and persevere because like your whole life has been a journey like that where you've had tons of those little mental checkpoints. So, and I think that, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong here, but that could be part of your daily routine is you have some disciplines that you just do on a day-to-day basis. So when those moments come, you're ready. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
I think the big one, I mean, I don't wake up and do anything special. It's just, I try to not make excuses, honestly. I mean, throughout my entire day, regardless of what you're doing, you just don't make excuses. And this is going to sound kind of weird. And I don't know how I can equate this to like a female viewer, but for a guy, in the morning, the first thing that gets me started in the morning is shaving, right? You take a shower and you shave. Like that's like kind of the beginning of your day. I take that. It's kind of like my little ritual to kind of get my mind right and where I'm going. And that sounds kind of lame, but I like to use like a no kidding, like old school safety razor. I mean, mine was made in like the early 1900s and the old, I mean, in the soap and brush thing, right? It's just because to me, there's care that has to be taken. You can't just take like your 5-bladed Gillette and just hack your face. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah,
honestly, there's a level of care that goes into it to not cut the crap out of your face every morning. I'm probably the only guy in the military that likes to shave on the weekends. So, like when we have to grow a beard out for like a TDY or deployment, I'm like, but can I shave? Or, really throwing my game off. But yeah, I think kind of just getting into a good routine. Like your first 30 minutes of being awake, get in a routine. And I think that will set your day up kind of for the rest of it is, going to be successful. I don't do anything crazy. I don't go run 20 miles in the morning. I hate running. Ask any TACP, they hate running. If the TACP says he likes running, he's a liar. But I don't do anything crazy or special. Probably the weirdest thing I do is I devote like 20 minutes a day to watch YouTube videos. And that's going to sound weird. But it is not just like random YouTube videos, but like go and find like a guy that does like really good carpentry and just watch a guy that's a professional work and the care they take into doing things. Like this morning, I watched a video about a luthier. So a guy that repairs guitars. Incredible. Like the amount of care and skill that he takes to do what seems like a pretty simple thing is impressive. And that can go for any YouTube channel. Just, the YouTube rabbit hole, just get down that and watch. And it kind of gives you, not only can you kind of see a skill and, hey, maybe that one random video I watched, 2 months ago can kind of relate to what I'm doing now. My wife hates it. That she thinks I wake up and the first thing I do is look at YouTube. But man, I just pick like a 10-20 minute video and try to like watch something new and learn something new every day.
That sounds to me like the pursuit of growth.
Yeah,
Jeff.
It does.
Because, we talk, so in our company, we teach our teams, our mission statement is build leaders and pursue growth while providing award-winning service. That's at Fire Dawgs. And that pursuit of growth is not just top-line sales. What we really teach our teams is like you should try to grow introspectively. And like, whether that be reading a book, listening to an audio book, watching, like you just said, watching a skilled tradesman or a skilled craftsman or just somebody who's like mastered their craft. There's so beauty in that, right? Somebody who found a discipline and just like now they are like an expert at it. Like there's skill in that. And I think that pursuit of growth for you is, watching the videos, that is telling of a characteristic of you, because that means I think it comes out in the things that you've done in your career is that you're always looking to push yourself, But the thing I also want to come back to is your shaving story with the blade and everything, taking that care and attention. I look at that as, have you ever heard Admiral McRaven's commencement speech at University of Texas?
Yes. Yep.
He wrote a book called Make Your Bed. Did you ever read that speech or heard the speech?
I have. Yep.
We still play that at Fire Dawgs probably at least once a year. And to me, there is discipline in doing something as subtle as getting up and making your bed. And it's not to say that, whether it's shaving your face or it's making your bed, I think I tie it into that you're starting out the day with a win. And that goes to mindset. Now you're positive. Now you're up one, right? On the score of the day, you're already in the net positive. And that having that victory right out the gate, man, I talk about it all the time with making your bed, but translation, shave your face with a straight razor that nobody else does and do it every day. Meet Nick Leis, You've got your victory to start the day. But I think your victory is almost more impactful than the bed, though, because what you're also talking about is like preparation and taking care and doing something purposefully. Because although our female viewers might not be able to relate to a man shaving his face every day, they still have things that they shave too, so they can relate to the preparation of having to pack your razor, having to pack the cream, having the time to get up in time to do it, because in the military world, your schedules are unpredictable, right? Dude, that to me is crazy disciplined, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Not to just continue to talk good about you. I mean, I can tell some bad stories about you too. I mean, we spent enough time together when we were.
Oh, there's plenty.
Okay, man. I'm sorry. I kind of got off on a tangent there.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back to the YouTube thing. So one thing that I've trying to get better at myself is keeping my ego in check and realizing that I can learn something from everyone. Sometimes I get, my ego of I've done this, I have this degree, and I have to catch myself like, no, dumbass, like you don't know everything. I can learn something.
I second
from
that.
Everyone in this world. Yeah, I knew you would. So like watching those YouTube videos is kind of cool, and that stuck out to me. That like it doesn't matter what that person does, like you can learn something from them, and I think that's an awesome takeaway. That kind of goes into this next question, sort of here, somewhat of a segue. Across the different career fields, you kind of touched on some people that have helped you and have been strong leaders along the way. So what are some key leadership takeaways that you can pass on to some of our listeners?
The big one off the top is listening, and like actively listening, not just like hearing and kind of, okay, yeah, cool, I got you. And like I said before, the people that have been impactful in my life, their first words out of their mouth were yes, not no. Like, hey, this is what I want to do. Can I do this? Yes. Let's start with yes, and then kind of like, peel back a little bit and see if it's still possible. That's a huge one. And in the military, you get leaders that are kind of separated, insulated by the chain of command. As a A1C, you're not necessarily going to be bros with your 05 commander. You know what I mean? Like that's not really how it works. But I think being humble and approachable in anything you do is huge. So, I think that A1C should feel comfortable if he's got, he wants to go talk to the commander. But kind of in the professional sense of being just like a TACP, you get like young guys. So, when I was a, sergeant somewhere between, staff and master sergeant, you've kind of like, you're in the area now that you're kind of the journeyman of your career field. And you have all these young guys, that don't really understand anything about being a TACP, and you just in every sense of the word. And some guys, they try to portray themselves as these like big, hard, I'll, take a bullet, blah, blah, blah. Cool. Everybody is willing to do that. But when you put that persona off that you're not humble, you're not approachable, you might be the best TACP that there has ever been. But if no one can learn from you, what's the point? To me, having a young dude that comes to me and for advice, one, that's a win. And that makes me feel good because, hey, he thinks that at least highly enough of me to ask me questions. But really like every young TACP that I've ever been around and helped train, when you see one that kind of like steps forward and goes and does something else, that's kind of like a proud, TACP dad moment for me. If you come in contact with someone and you're not really helping them be better, I mean, really, what are you there for? Honestly.
Boom. Dadgummit, Nick. That's twice today you're making me smack the table, dude. That's the good stuff.
Yeah.
Reach one, teach one, right? Build somebody up. People should come in. If they come into your life, they should leave better, and that's, man, sorry, keep going.
No, I think it's there's like a Maya Angelou quote about they're not going to remember what you said or what you did. They're going to remember how you made them feel. In the TACP world, the biggest compliment someone can say is like, if you get your name mentioned somewhere and they're like, he's a good dude, like just getting the, he's a good dude thing. Like that is like a vibe check for TACPs. And it really comes down to that. It's you're either a bro or you're not a bro, you're either there to help people or you're there just to stand in the way. And there's honestly no in between. You're either helping or you're not.
Jeff, I'm about to jump all over this, man. So if you want to beat me to it, go for
it. There's a lot to jump on, so I think we'll split it. The first one is the act of listening. Like you said, there's and we say to effective communication. It's not just, if you're talking, the person is also receiving the communication, which means that they are active listening. It's not just, okay, yeah, So I think that was a big one right out of the gate. And then
I'll pause there real quick. I want to piggyback on a good quote. I was just watching. There's a Coach Lyle. He's a kind of a social media personality. He's a coach, and he cited Nick Saban recently. And Nick Saban, did you see this? Nick Saban was doing a camp with kids, and he started the clip started out with him saying something to the effect, and I'm going to butcher this, so just bear with me. But essentially, he said, my mom told me growing up that God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you're going to start with listening. And he told all the kids that. And, and it's so simple. It's so well put, but that's the truth, right?
Right.
And it goes back to what you're saying, and what you're saying is like, you got 2 ears, you got 1 mouth. That means you should be listening first, and listening with intent purpose. So Coach Saban brought home a little gold nugget there.
Yeah. And then I just finished a book called Enchantment by Guy Kawasaki. So this is fresh on the top of my mind. But one thing he talks about in there in particular was as a leader starting with yes. And you said that specifically, which I think is key. You know, as you said, if somebody approaches you, it's not like well, I don't know if it's yes, let's find a way to do this. Let's see if we can make this happen. I think that's a powerful statement as a leader.
Yeah. How can I instead of I can't? Like you come to me and Nick's like, hey, you know, so I've gone ahead and I've been air transportation. I've been firefighter. That wasn't good enough. So I became a firefighter paramedic, you know, and then I was like, hey, I'm going to be TACP. Now I'm a pilot. So then he's going to go to, you know, the president one day and say, hey, I want your job. Can you go ahead and help me out on how to do that? And he's going to say, if he starts with, well, how can we make that happen, Nick? You know, Nick will figure it out. Like that's what we're learning today.
Right.
But yeah, I think the attitude of how can I instead of I can't, or start with yes, and then see if later down the road it doesn't make sense anymore. But man, the thing too though is just trying to make this relatable to, you know, people out there who not even just in their firefighting careers, but this applies to both. You know what we're talking about here, and you know Chief Brunacini wrote in his book. He tells a story, and I don't know if it was in his book or you know, Phoenix fire chief, well renowned in the fire world. But he tells the story of a lieutenant or a captain, and I'm butchering this too. So the guys out there that know this better than me, you can, you know, blow me smoke later. But he tells a story, and always stuck with me was, and you've been in the firehouse, and you've probably heard this same story, right? The guy comes in, and it's a new guy, and he doesn't know anything. He just he knows he wants to be a firefighter. He has a passion for being a firefighter, but he doesn't know anything because he's a probie, and that's the perception, right? Probies don't know anything. And there are some things that we didn't know as new firefighters, and we were intimidated, right? Walking into the station the first day, and there's some burly guys with full Manchu, you know, I mean, they're intimidating. And there's a story Chief Brunacini tells is like a lieutenant or a captain is complaining about how this new group of firefighters, they just don't know anything like the last generation. Last generation knew how to do X, Y, Z. They could fix their house and do everything inside the home, right? These new firefighters, they don't even know how to start up a chainsaw. And Chief Brunacini, the story, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he says, okay, well, did you show them how to start the chainsaw? Did you sit down and show them the inner workings of the chainsaw so that they would know how to start it? Did you teach, show, watch, something to that effect? And the lieutenant's like, well, no, they should know how to do that coming in here as a probie. And he goes, well, man, imagine the impact you could have if you would have taught them, shown them, and then they know how to do it the next time. That would improve your day and improve their day, right? And it comes back to that leadership of, instead of, well, they can't do this, they can't do, and say like, okay, well, how can we do this? You know, I'm going to go in here. If you came into my sphere, right, as a firefighter, you came on my truck and you're on the back seat with me and I'm the senior guy on the back seat, I'm going to make sure you know where every tool is on the truck so that when we show up on scene, it's there. You know, I know what he's going to know what to do, and he knows he can come to me for help. You know, that way we don't even have to bother the officer up front. You know, taking ownership of your spot and trying to bring the next person up is kind of, in a way, what you're talking about here, which applies to firefighting, but it also applies to home services. It doesn't even have to be firefighting, doesn't have to be TACP, doesn't have to be a pilot. These career fields that people who are running small home service companies can't relate to in terms of doing them. But the essence of leadership is the same regardless, which is that if somebody comes into your sphere of influence, you have a responsibility to ensure that you are teaching them good things so that when they exit your sphere of influence, they exit better than when they came in. And that's, I think, to your point, is when we're talking about leadership here, that you've already owned that, which is why I had to smack the table and celebrate, because like that's the freaking perfect answer. Like, you've been doing that and living it. And I just think that's so telling, man, about your success and just who you are as a man and as a leader yourself, is because I'm going to back up. You also had another career field that we didn't mention, which anybody who is in the military or specifically the Air Force is going to like be surprised to hear that you were also a first shirt.
Yeah, I did that for, that was about the time I got picked up to be a pilot. So that was a pretty short-lived foray, but honestly, it was great.
Explain what the first shirt means to our listeners, because nobody's going to know what that means.
Okay, so the first shirt, you're basically you're the liaison between the commander and the enlisted force. So you're kind of there is that kind of like mean dad if you have to be, and then also the caring mother at times too. I mean,
but the perception of most people in the enlisted ranks is that the first shirt is the latter, right? Not the former, or vice versa.
Yeah. So go ahead. What are you gonna say?
Yeah. So that the perception is that like the first shirt is like the disciplinary, and like that's where you're going to get the disappointed dad talks for the most part, right?
Right. Yeah. To me, I took the first shirt role as just being a mentor, and at times that means, is there discipline that needs to be, doled out? 100%. But I would say 95% of the interactions I had were just, dudes and dudettes coming into my office and being like, hey, I've got this problem, and unfortunately the majority of the time it's, you got an 18, 19-year-old kid. He's not very good with money yet, so it's usually like money related. And it, luckily the Air Force and the Guard in general have great programs. I mean, it's a no questions asked, like, hey, just go talk to this person and they're going to give you X amount of money for gifts or gift cards to to Walmart to get you through the next 2 weeks until you get paid again. Probably not super legal, but I would give people money out of my own pocket. I mean, it's not a, and it wasn't even, hey, pay this back. It was like, dude, you need this money, take this money, because these guys are 18 and 19 years old, and you're trying to teach them, to help control $1 million aircraft and drop bombs, within 100 meters of people that you don't actually want to hurt. They don't need to be worrying about that other stuff. So I kind of took that role as, let's clean your plate off and let's let you focus on what you need to focus on. And just kind of help that way. Punishment was part of it. I actually hated that part. I'm not a big paperwork guy. So I like to do the paperwork or physical challenge punishment. So if a guy wants paperwork, I'll give it to him. But if not, hey, go get your rucksack and put 100 pounds in it and let's go for a ruck. You're going to pay with your sweat. So
I think the takeaway there, because how it was in the military. You hear, oh, you're gonna end up in the first shirts office. Bah, it's always like that threat. You want to end up in the first shirts office? I'm like, as you're a kid, you're like, do you want me to tell dad? But I think that mindset comes back into it, because again, when we were talking ahead of time, your mindset going into that position, which has the perception that it has, because there's probably a lot of first shirts that don't have that mindset, which is, how can I come in here and use the first shirt role, the first sergeant, right? How can I use the first sergeant's position and make it a leadership opportunity and grow as a leader, pursue that growth and build leaders out of this position. That's the mindset. That's the key, right? Otherwise, if you go with the other one and all it is discipline, and it's just a checking a box on your way up and attaining rank within the military, then you're going in it with the wrong motives. But you, man, just continuing to be who you are, like that's such the right mindset to do something like that, because you do have such an impact on 18, 19, 20-year-old people. And as we know in the military, like this is just like with pro athletes, like at 18, 19, 20, we just don't know much. We don't know much at 26, 36. I know I'm not going to know what I know now, and I'll be at 46 like, man, I was really dumb at 36, like it's just that we at 18, 19, and 20 though, my goodness. And you're faced with these big life, challenges in front of you being in the military and what that can mean. And here you are, instead of like looking at this as like, you screwed up, I'm going to get a paper trail going on you, we're going to get you out as fast as we can. You took the approach of, you screwed up. Guess what? We all did at 18, 19, 20. Your screw up was different than mine. Let's unpack this. Let's find out how we can get you back on the straight and narrow. And let's also find out what we can take away from it. Or just in the instance of being there to support somebody when they need it, like your story you were telling, like, man, like that's just what it's about. You shouldn't always be looking like, how quickly can I get somebody out of this position? Or if you're running a home services company, how quickly can I get somebody out of the company because they keep screwing up? It's not to say that you won't ever have to do that, but if the mindset first is that, what can I use this as a teaching opportunity and a coaching opportunity, and hopefully impact somebody's life positively first, man, that's the difference, right? And that comes back to you, I think, your testament as a leader for you. So more kudos, man.
Jump in real quick on that too. So one thing that stuck out to me is through all the books that I've read and people I've listened to that are way smarter than I am, one of the things they always talk about is take care of yourself first. And I think it can be easy as a business owner, and in this situation, somebody comes to you and they're having personal money issues, that you can easily swipe that aside and say, that's not my problem. You should handle your money better. But I think people overlook that can eventually affect how they perform. Like you said, they got other stuff they need to work. Obviously, as pilots and people in the military, it's way more important than coming in and doing your job as a junk remover here specifically. But it's the same concept. Like, man, this guy's really struggling. What's going on? Well, if you look back, he came to you and said he's having money troubles and you didn't help him. Like, that stuff's eventually going to spill over and affect his performance. So I think that's something else that's awesome that could be easily overlooked sometimes, and we don't really focus in on some of those personal issues that people have and just kind of wipe them off when we should delve into it and really help them through those.
Nick,
100%.
we gotta talk about, we gotta mix it up, dude. I mean, we're just sitting over here like patting you on the back the whole episode. Now I gotta like humble you, bro. We gotta bring it back down to earth. We spent I don't remember how many years together in Terre Haute, but when I was at Indiana State and we were in the Guard together, and we were roomies, and then we were up at Curacao together, dude. So what is the moment when we were before being a dad? Okay. What are some times where, as a young guy trying to figure out what to do in life, where you just completely like made some bonehead decisions, and what were some takeaways you had from it? So we're not just always unpacking the wins here. Let's try to unpack some losses, because surely in that journey, maybe it was a bum job that you had, or maybe you did walk out on a job and make a bad decision as a young man and get frustrated and walk out on something. Like what's some of those failures, coming back to that in the early stages, in the early 20s?
Man, there's a lot. There are a lot. Before I got into the military, I was like 18, trying to go to school. Didn't really have a way to pay for it, so I got a job working for a place. They did injection molding for Honda Odyssey vans, so like the rocker panels and all that stuff. So I'm working third shift doing that, right? Going to school. And I was not built for college. I still am not built for college. I literally just got my degree because it was a step in the path to becoming a pilot. So I didn't really look forward to doing it. I just had to kind of, put your head down and just kind of truck through. But no, I was working there, and they were like, hey, we're going to give one of you on the night shift in this injection molding the opportunity to go to day shift. And I'm like, sick. Because college isn't working out anyway. I was making like 13 or 14 bucks an hour, which in the early 2000s wasn't bad, for a single 18-year-old kid.
Right.
And so I was like, all right, yeah, man. They're like, hey, whoever, turns out X amount of parts, it seems like a competition. I'm like, yeah, dude, no big deal. Not that I was taking it lightly, but I got my butt kicked by some like 60-year-old woman. Dude, she crushed me. Like, I can't remember how many parts she turned out, but they're like, so we had like this big meeting, and they're like, hey, so her name was Donna. They're like, hey, Donna's gonna be going to day shift. I'm like, what the? You gotta be kidding me. So like, honestly, dude, like that was pretty humbling, and it wasn't, the job wasn't. I'm not saying it wasn't critical, but it was a factory job. It was good work. You had to work hard. But dude, like just failing at something that was like, I thought was pretty easy and I kind of had it in the bag. I was like, wow, I definitely took that pretty lightly. And that's kind of been the theme throughout everything I've done. If I take anything lightly, the chances of you failing are much higher, and that can go into anything, I never did it as a TACP because you can't. I mean, you can't just kind of like half plan for a mission and then go out and be, woefully unprepared, because that's just dumb and dangerous. But I mean, dude, it could be anything. Like if you're going to take a road trip and you're like, yeah, I'm pretty sure my spare tire is ready to go, or, X, Y, and Z, you just go off down the road and, you're in the middle of nowhere and some hills have eyes country and flat tire. You know what I mean? So, and dude, like, for entrepreneurs, it can be anything as simple as, hey, do you have a plan for when things aren't going well? So for like, example, COVID, I mean, do you have a plan? Have you thought it through? Have you taken this lightly and now it's kind of catching up to you and you're getting overwhelmed, or do you kind of have a plan and you can see a way through it? That's basically how you got to deal with, I guess, failures at the beginning.
I'm gonna unpack another fun story that's a failure, and it involves you. And I'm bringing this up from that time from that time frame. So Nick does have an entrepreneurial bug, so it didn't surprise me that he built a product and then licensed it, because I think he knows where I'm going with this now. Yeah. So we're in the guard unit together, and because I was active duty, and then I ended up finishing in the guard at Terre Haute, and that's where Nick and I were buddied up, and we both had a kind of a bug. We're like, well, I was in Indiana State at the time, was full-time college student, and I was also full-time at Terre Haute Airport Fire Department with Chief Stewart, who was the fire chief.
Yep.
And Chief Stewart was also gracious enough to let me be a full-time college student and a full-time firefighter at the Airport Fire Department. So he let me use all my leave that I earned from sick leave, annual leave. I could use it to go to college and continue my coursework. So he was awesome. Chief Stewart was awesome. But Nick and I one day were like, hey, let's start a business, or like let's figure something out, because Chief was always talking about these tradesmen. Like, yeah, there's guys that all they do is do crown molding, or they do trim, or they lay tile, and then Nick's like, hey, we can do that. He goes, yeah. He goes, I just got done doing this job where I agreed to put tile in somebody's house, and he goes, and I did it. I got a little over my head. I was there basically all day, and I wasn't done, and then so I stayed all night. And I ended up falling asleep in the basement with a big gulp and probably a fast food bag or something. He's telling me this story, and he's saying it with such gusto, and he's all excited. And he's like, yeah, I ended up falling asleep, and I just slept there. And then when I woke up, I just kept working, and I got the job done. He goes, but man, I know we could do it better next time. Let's start a tile flooring company. And I'm listening to that story, and like a normal person would be like, that sounds miserable. Like, why would I do that? And I look at Nick, I'm like, yeah, man, that sounds good. Let's do it. Let's go figure this out. But yeah, I think we ended up waking up a couple of days later, and thankfully we didn't end up going and doing those kinds of jobs. But you were always doing stuff like that. You always had little side hustles, and they didn't always go well. But you always had that optimistic spirit that even when you, quote unquote, failed at something, it wasn't quite a failure. It was more of just a learning opportunity, and that work ethic clearly carried over. So that was a fun story from when we were in our early 20s and thinking we were going to conquer the world, the tile flooring world.
Yeah.
Clearly, I didn't quite have the excitement because I never did one with you.
The Tile Kings right now.
Terre Haute Tile Kings, man. That could have been TerreHauteTileKings.com. Okay, brother, let's do something else that we'd like to talk about. Is I'm completely stealing this from Tim Ferriss, who I don't know if you ever read Tribe of Mentors or Tools of Titans. He's also the 4-Hour Work Week. He's got a lot of books out there. But one question he asks is, if you could have a billboard anywhere that everyone could see, what would it say on it and
why? What are you waiting for? I mean, I think the why is pretty self-explanatory. Everybody wants to, they want to do something, but like we said, there's obstacles in the way. You're not ever going to get anything handed to you. I think my rich Uncle Scrooge doesn't exist, so I'm not going to just fall into millions of dollars, and enjoy my life, driving fast sports cars and living on a beach. That's not how it works. So, if you got an idea and you want to do it, I mean, what are you waiting for? Honestly, to even be more blunt about it, losers make excuses, winners find a way.
Nice.
But yeah, I think it kind of explains the why in that.
Jeff, fire away. I see one more there I know that you're going to jump on.
Let me see. Yeah, so the kind of to go along with that, do you have a favorite book or a book that you commonly gift to somebody?
My favorite book it's a book by Jeffrey Regan. It's called Military Blunders. And it's from, basically BC time all the way up through, roughly 2000s. And it is, for the most part, pretty fair in regards to the losers and winners. But it's just showing hey, this military force X had all this advantage and got absolutely smoked by some smaller, less prepared or, less ill-equipped force. And to me, that just kind of I take and they're all little, they're not very long. Each story's, each little thing's maybe like 6 to 9 pages long. It's not very in depth, but it gives you like a good, like, hey, don't ever get too overconfident in what you've got going on that you can't fail. And then on the flip side of that is don't let, a bad situation determine the outcome. You can still push ahead and win.
Right on, brother. I know we got to get you out of here. But man, I can't even begin to thank you for sharing the stories. And I know that your career is not over. You've got a lot of exciting things in front of you. But man, just being able to talk with what you've done so far, I know there's some people out there listening that are going to be able to grab some value from this, and you just never know who you're impacting. That's what we always talk about. You never know who your story is going to reach, and I knew your story was just amazing and getting it out here. So for you to be willing to do that, we're super grateful, man. And but we're going to tie a bow on it here. And if somebody wants to reach out and connect with you, or follow you on XYZ social media, what should we do? Should we put that in the notes, or do you have something that they can connect with you on?
I've got an email I can give you.
Okay, brother.
You can put that in the notes.
Okay, man. Nick, be safe, brother. I hope to talk to you again soon. We'll see you soon once you come back to the fort. When you finish your training, I'll be up there. We'll connect then. Thanks again, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Nick.
I appreciate it, guys.
Thanks for joining Firepreneurs today. We hope that we delivered value in your leadership journey. We humbly ask that you take the time to leave us a 5-star review, as that's how our podcast will rise in rankings and become available to more people. We'd love to hear from you, so you can email us by emailing firepreneurs@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or by watching us on our Firepreneurs YouTube channel. Stay hungry and get after it.